Good morning, everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Dr. Jennifer Levin, and I'm here with From Grief to Growth for another Facebook Live. Today, we are going to be talking about how long is your grief going to last? And I am logging in, or I'm coming to you from Whidbey Island. And can you believe that we actually have rain today in the middle of August? And I know many of you are dealing with the heat. I specialize in working with individuals who are living with a sudden and traumatic loss and help them move towards healing and away from the pain that is often accompanies a sudden and a traumatic loss. So, again, today we are going to be talking about what it is like. Or the questions that you may be having about how long that your grief is going to be going on when you are dealing with a sudden loss. So I remember working with a client once, one of my newer clients, and she said, this grief is like a life sentence. It's a jail sentence. And she's not the only one who said that to me. I've had so many clients say that to me, and you may be feeling that as well. Well, you've probably figured out by now that grief is something that you're going to be living with for a very, very long time, and that it probably will not be going away. But your grief experience is going to change over time, and it's going to be getting very, very different. And with time, it does get easier. But I want to address some of the specifics about grief today and how it does change over time. Now, it's so important to remember grief is a natural process. It's not a disease. You're not broken. Your heart probably feels so broken, but grief is natural and it's something that we all experience. And how you experience your grief, it's going to be different for everybody, but there's different factors that are going to be involved, and one of them is going to be on the relationship that you had with the person, your loved one. Was it your spouse? Was it a son or daughter? Was it a parent? Was it a friend? And how close were you to that person? Some people are estranged. Some people you've been living with your loved one for 50 years and seeing them every day. Some people, their loved one lived across the states and you didn't see them very often, or it was a grandparent. So, how you experience your grief, how long your grief is going to last, is going to be influenced by the relationship you had and how often you saw your loved one. The second thing is going to be your experience with loss and your experience with death in general. Is this the first time you've ever lost somebody? That's going to influence it. Or have you had multiple losses throughout your life? Unfortunately, or fortunately, the more times that we've experienced the loss, the more skilled we get at coping with it. Maybe it's philosophically or experientially, but we are better at coping the more we've had. Other people might feel like we're just more heartbroken. It just depends on how the time in between, how much time we've had to process the loss. So, the number of losses you've had is also going to influence how you're coping with that. Also, social support is going to influence how you cope with your grief and how it feels like how long your grief is going to last. If you have an amazing support system that's really there to hold you, to help you cope with your grief, it's going to influence how long your grief is going to last. And finally, how your loved one died. And I expect that most of you who listen to my Facebook Lives and my work have had a sudden a sudden loss, and that's going to make the grief last longer. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. But let's just talk generally right now. The research shows that within 6 months to 1 to 2 years, you can expect some of the common grief symptoms to go away. And what do I mean by a grief symptom? Well, by a grief symptom, I'm talking about problems with your sleep, maybe problems with your appetite, your inability to feel joy, feelings of anger, general sadness, loss of interest in things. So those are some of the common symptoms. Your desire to isolate yourself from others, withdraw from the world. Those are some of the general symptoms that we experience when someone that we've lost is no longer with us. And again, these are just symptoms of grief. And that's just what the common research shows us, or the general research shows us, that those can go away anytime within 6 months to 1 to 2 years. As you can see, that's just a very general time frame. May not help at all. And again, keep in mind those factors that I talked about a few minutes ago. Those are going to mediate or influence how long those affect you. Now, if you've had a sudden or unexpected loss, all bets may be off. If you're experiencing a lot of trauma symptoms, the anxiety, the hypervigilance, some of the things that I've talked about in my earlier podcasts or my Facebook lives, that's going to complicate it a lot more. And so it may be that you're experiencing those symptoms on top of your grief. It's going to complicate it a lot more, and you may be much more symptomatic for a greater period of time than I just described on top of the 6 months to 2 years. Now, the symptoms may ease, they may go away, but the grief, the yearning for your loved one who has died, that doesn't go away. You're always going to miss them. There's always going to be that hole in your heart, that desire for that person to come back. But it does change. It changes over time. If you've been following any of my work or listening to me for a while, you know that I often use a phrase called moving towards healing, because I don't believe we ever heal from a loss of a loved one. We're never healed. How could we be? We're constantly moving towards healing throughout our lifetime, but it does get easier over time. You're not always going to feel the way you do right now. Some people are able to find meaning, peace, comfort, even growth. But that can be really hard to hear, or even unimaginable if you're in a difficult phase right now and you're very raw and you can't even think of being in a phase later on in your grief where that is something that you will be experiencing. The best thing that I can tell you is, don't fight your grief. Just accept the feelings and allow yourself to be in them when you're feeling it. Your grief is going to take as long as it's going to take. There's really no other way to say it. It's going to be here for as long as it's going to be here. It's going to come in waves. Some days are going to be easier than others. Some days may feel like a roller coaster with a lot of ups and downs. Some days aren't going to be as bad. Some days are going to be a challenge. And that's when it's really important that you have the social support, you have the coping mechanisms, you have things in place to help you with the difficult spots. But do know it does get easier in time, but it doesn't ever fully go away. You're always going to have the deep yearning for the individual, the loved one who was so dear to you, who's no longer here. It's important to mention that you may need additional support with your grief. And there are times in your life for some individuals where it just might be too overwhelming, and professional support may be beneficial. And I want to point out at least 3 scenarios where it might be time to seek support. And here are those scenarios. Number one, if you're having difficulty functioning with your day to day tasks, you can't make it to work. You can't take care of the kids or other adults who might be dependent on you. It's time to call someone. Number two, you're experiencing debilitating trauma symptoms. The flashbacks, the ruminations, the anxiety, the hypervigilance, things I've talked about in my podcast or other things, are just getting too difficult for you. You need to get some support. And finally, you're turning to unhealthy coping strategies: alcohol, drugs, overeating, shopping, whatever it may be. But you've picked up an unhealthy behavior to help you cope with your grief. There's no judgment here. We all do it at times because grief, and especially traumatic and sudden loss, is so painful. So, those are some indicators that it might be time to get some additional support to help you through this very, very difficult time. I've mentioned my podcast several times. It is Untethered, Coping and Healing from Traumatic, Untethered Healing from a Sudden Death. You can find me on Apple, Spotify, and other podcast channels. So, my speaking of podcast, my next podcast is going to be Wednesday, April 17th, and it's called The Guilt, Blame, and Shame Are Killing Me. So, I hope you tune in for that. I also want to invite you to subscribe to to sign up for my free mini course, um, Three Truths for Living with a Sudden Loss. And you can find that on my website, www.fromgrieftogrowth.com. I hope this was helpful for you today. Take care of yourself. Bye for now.